Hey everyone, Boardgame Brody here with Meeple Mountain. I have a prototype copy of The Fog, Escape from Paradise, a racing game using movement points by Xollox Games. So let's get right into it. Players play as islanders who are being threatened by a mysterious, dark wall of fog. Courageous warriors, wise elders, and many others have entered the fog, and no one has ever came back. At this time, the entire island has been swallowed up except for this last village, and the fog has suddenly gotten faster, causing panic, and now it's time to hurry to the awaiting boats, before getting swallowed by the fog. Players start the game by first drafting islanders laid out on the board. When you have chosen an islander for your team, you will place your colored disc beneath it. The next player will then do the same. And players will do this until all islanders are drafted. When drafting, you will need to consider the island's special ability, their starting location, their color, and the location of the same colored boat, and lastly, maybe where and how your network of islanders connect with each other. After the draft, players now take turns moving their islanders using 7 movement points using different types of movements. After each player performs their turn in a round, the fog will then move 1 step forward, and you will check to see if any islanders were taken by the fog. This continues until the fog reaches the boats. Scoring is then performed by where your islanders ended up in the boats, and the player with the most points wins. Now let's reverse this a little bit and go over the ways that you can use your movement points on your turn. When the turn marker is then on your number, it's your turn. You will then use your movement point track to keep track of how many points you use during your turn so you don't forget. You will then move from hex to hex until you get to the shore where there are 3 slots to move on each pier. A lot of the game is played on the beach, which has 6 different actions. But when you're in the water, your choices are then narrowed down. And when taking these actions, you can only perform the actions when the hexes that you would land are open for you to perform that action. Anyways, the first action is to run, and this costs 1 movement point, and you can move to any empty adjacent hex. Pretty easy. Though at the beginning of the game, the beach is super crowded, so you might not be able to run, but you can do this second action, which is to swap. This costs 3 movement points, and you will swap places from 1 adjacent islander of your choice. Action 3 is to push. This costs 3 movement points. You can then push up to 2 islanders, either straight, or you can do this push action angled. All push tokens move in the same direction. This action can be a very good strategic move while you push your own islanders while also moving the active islander that you chose. But if you don't want to help your fellow players move quicker to the boats, you can do another action, which is this 4th action, jump. This uses 3 movement points. Here you'll be able to jump over 1 other islander, and you can only do this in a straight line, and you can only do it again if there's an open spot for you to land. The 5th action is to squeeze, costing 4 movement points. You can squeeze through any combination of 2 islanders, obstacles, or woods. The last action, the 6th action, is to cross. Using 4 movement points, you can cross over an obstacle and land either straight or angled like you see here. All actions besides the first one, run, only can be performed towards the boats or sideways, never backwards. But the run action can be performed backwards. Now that you know the basic actions, you might think of this as pretty straightforward. But check out all the islanders. They all have some sort of icon listed on their token. Well, each islander has their own special ability. The islanders with the push, the jump, the cross, and the squeeze icons all can perform those actions at a lower cost of 2 movement points. So you could try to take advantage of their skills to do those certain actions to be more efficient in the game. The islander with a 3 is known as the all-rounder and can perform the squeeze and cross actions for 3 movement points. And the islander with the +1 is an islander with endurance. After the islander has moved sometime during your turn, and after you used all your 7 movement points, you can then run 1 additional field for free, if possible, including entering a boat or switching sides in a boat. Players will continue taking turns moving their islanders onto boats or closer to them. When getting to water starting with the shore, you can only do the run and swap actions, and this is for the shore, the piers, and on the boats. But even though you can only perform 2 different actions, you can land on other islanders, but by the end of your turn they need to reach an empty hex or an empty slot. Now I haven't explained the scoring yet, but when boarding boats you will want to maximize your potential to score the most points. But each islander can enter any boat independent from its color. To move into a boat, you will need to enter by the pier or from the shore, or by the planks. Once you enter a boat, you cannot leave. The islander can only take a spot in the spot that matches their picture, or they can move to the stern, which is the back of the boat that has a listed maximum capacity. The first islander who reaches a matching place in a boat, not the stern, reaches the top preparation bonus of that boat for making it more ready for departure. This is one of the 4 ways to score points, and this is known as the preparation bonus and will count towards your final score. In addition, you will receive 4 points for each islander of your own that matches its color with the boat's color that it's in. You will then get points for each islander you have in their respective areas of A through D on the boat's scoring markers to the left. The further back you get, more likely the more points you will score. Lastly, for each islander lost in the fog, you will receive negative points that match up to the left of the beach row where the islander disappeared at. So as you can see, you want to get to the boats as soon as possible. You want to match the color of the islander with the same colored boat. You want to match its type with its type shown on the boat, and you want to minimize your casualties. The player who does the best at this will win the game. Now let's talk about the game. Now, I first thought that the game's drafting phase would be super obvious as to who you're going to choose, obviously the people closer to the boat. I was surprised that even though it kind of followed that pattern, it didn't exactly. Like, there might be an islander on the front row, but still has to move all the way to the other side of the board to get on its nation's boat. This islander is less desirable than the one that is 3, 4, or even 5 rows back, but still on the same side of the board as its boat. Each islander type also has a spot in the boat that you might want to draft those islanders who will score you the more points by getting them further up in the boat. But while doing this, you will need to spend more actions to get them there, so keep that in mind. Also, you can see if there are any other types in the same color and where they are located on the island. The islander's abilities can come into play when drafting. These are less important in the front, but feel very important as you get islanders further back because you will take more actions with them and you will need to navigate them through the panic and get them onto a boat safely. So really, the draft will set you up with a strategy for the game, and as the game progresses, you will then make decisions on making your front row islanders get points before those point tokens in each boat drop versus moving your back row islanders closer. There is only so much open room for the back people, so you might need to strategically move some of the other islanders to make room for the back ones to move up. There is a spot that bottlenecks everything, so you might get stuck behind a lot of other islanders. Luckily, the swap action lets you move even when there is a huge crowd. This action actually can surprise another player, as they might go first, and then when you go, you might swap positions with them, letting them get lost in the fog, as they won't have another turn before the fog moves up. The fog is timed pretty nicely. It will swallow some islanders in the game, so watch out, and if you are like my daughter and want everyone to make it, that is very unlikely going to happen. But the fog takes a couple turns before it starts moving up on the board, giving all players a couple rounds to get things going. And then as it gets closer to the shore, it will start moving faster, and I mean 2 lines at a time. And it will, at those positions, get a lot of islanders. But the timing of the fog each time I've played the game is very fair. Also, each time I've played, players have all scored very close to each other while still playing totally different strategies from each other. So one player might focus on getting islanders in the boat at the very beginning of the game, getting those extra points, but they might struggle with their islanders behind as they are more likely to get stuck in the bottleneck and have an increased chance to get lost in the fog. Another player might move their furthest islanders back up, filling up those far back open slots, forfeiting those early points for getting islanders in the boat, but less likely losing islanders in the fog. And others are a combination of those too. But all the strategy is wrapped within the islanders that you drafted and their abilities. I personally really like the +1 islanders, as I feel like I get an extra 1 movement point using them. The prototype version I have is a 4-player version, but in the Kickstarter they will offer a 6-player version. And I think that would be pretty epic. The spread on the board with all the boats and all the islanders crisscrossing makes me imagine how much panic would actually be happening in that situation. Anyways, the game is really solid. Surprised how solid it is. I like the 4 scoring methods. First to the boat, getting extra points. Just getting to the ship that matches your color, getting points. And then the randomization of points of how far back and forward you get on the boat, getting points. And that can really change your strategy of what face of islanders that you might draft. And then lastly, the negative points for getting caught by the fog. The further back you get swallowed up, the more points you lose. So get the most points by getting your islanders off the island and into boats with your family and friends in The Fog, Escape from Paradise by Xollox Games. Again, this is Board Game Brody. I hope you enjoyed this video. Stick around and check out some other board game reviews to see what you might want to get to the table.